Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. Thomas, what are we here for?
We are here to applaud the tremendous research of Betsy Ross, who discovered the real reason that Julian Assange no longer has internet connection, and it seems as if he may soon, face the problem that he's in. And they may kick him out of the embassy, and then we were trying to figure that out. Everybody's been trying to figure that out, but only Betsy Ross figured it out.
Well, it was really bothering me about why right around now they turned everything off. And then I got thinking that, all of you out there, you're waking people up so incredibly quickly that it's beginning to bother the people that are really in charge of this planet. They really don't know what to do with it. And that's why I think that they think it's coming from Julian Assange, so they just cut him off totally. Of course, we all know that it's not just coming from Julian, it's coming from all of us as we run this decentralized network of truth revelation. Now, the reason I set that up is it has always bothered me about why Julian Assange's internet went off back in March 28th. And so I've been holding that in my mind. And as you also know, we've been doing a lot of research on strategic communications laboratories, the Spygate story, and how it all connects to the Crown. Well, as I was looking through finding news for you guys, I saw this article, and it was dated in March 20th. And I read it, and it was like reading one of our citizen intelligence reports about Cambridge Analytica and about the Brits and the whatever. And I'm looking at the date going, my gosh, this was back in March. This was long before we also reported the same thing, which is good because when different research teams are working and they don't know each other and they come to the same conclusion, then we can know that it's even more powerful than one of us by ourselves. I'm sorry, I'm rambling, right? But,
No, you're not rambling.
Okay. But here was the thing. I read the article, and then I thought, I think I remember Julian Assange tweeting out something like this. But I wasn't aware of what SCL was at the time, and I wasn't paying attention to Cambridge Analytica. And sure enough, that story came out on the 20th of March. And 2 days later, we have a tweet from Julian pointing to that very article. And when you read the article, you're going to talk about that article in a minute. And then on March 28th, Ecuadorian cuts off Julian Assange's internet access. Boom. So, what do you think?
And then they try to blame it on him, making the remark that, yeah, I don't believe the gassing of the previous spy story in Skripal. It's like, and his relative. He came out and said that. Yeah, so what? So did anyone with any brain would know that every time they do that, it's a setup. For some reason, well, I can tell you the reason.
Well, what he's doing, but what Julian may or may not have realized, I'm not in Julian's brain, and what we are showing and have shown and will be continuing to show that this thing called Spygate actually leads right back to the Queen.
Oh, yes. And so it was official sources that said, you can't criticize this and say that this was a fake gas attack here in Britain. No, you can't do that, Julian. We told you to stay away from politics. I don't know how that's politics, but it's now basically been proven that it didn't happen, so he was right. But we, of course, didn't know that he had posted an article pointing to this wonderful, pointed in the direction of this article.
No, he posted a tweet, not an article, that pointed to the article.
Very good. From Bella Caledonia.
Yeah.
Where we basically saw what was a British Aim for Truth, anonymous Patriot intelligence report that demonstrated beyond a shadow of a doubt that the very people we were tracking down at the same time, some of them,
on a different trail,
led to the same place, and we're going, oh my heavens. And so we vetted that article and looked very carefully at it, and it helped us in our research because it named some people and some groups that we didn't know about because we're not British. And the person who wrote that article, I forget who wrote it, but whoever wrote it really has an inside track and very carefully gave so many details about the individuals involved that it was impeachable.
By the way, the author was Liam O'Hare, and the link to all of this that you're talking about is in the description box below.
So we had discovered through research with Americans for Innovation, Leader Technology experts, Michael McKibben, a bunch of researchers, and our researchers in the conclave, that the British control of some of our systems and services in America are absolutely out of balance and in the control of British companies, basically faking having American roots, but they don't, and they go back to a small group of people. And the person who seems to be the head of that is Sir Geoffrey Patty, who holds the Queen's golden shares in British Aerospace, which controls a huge portion of Lockheed, which controls Serco. And Serco is basically run by the Terryton Management, which is run by Sir Geoffrey and Patty. And what we're talking about here is a very small group of people, what you could call kind of a corporate intelligence group around the Queen that makes sure that the Queen's business is, looked after very carefully. But unfortunately, many of them are connected to the intelligence sources, Department of Defense, the MI6, everything, basically everything. We now have lists of these people who were involved, who I guess because in England they had another issue that brought all of this out before the issue came out of Cambridge Analytica, because we started studying Cambridge Analytica to see, what all that hoo-ha was about, and it led us back to SCL. I may say that word a lot now, but there are many SCLs. Strategic Communication Laboratories has many groups. SCL Group, SCL Elections, SCL Social, SCL, so many that the researchers keep telling us every day they're going to have this fantastic article revealing all these people, in great detail, because we said, when Cambridge Analytica went down, we looked, and the mother company also went bankrupt, SCL. Well, isn't that odd? They're in England. And so we looked closer, and we found out that there was a huge election scam with Brexit involving the mother company of Cambridge Analytica. And so we now find that they're directly connected, and that the spying on the election from Christopher Steele, from Sir Richard Dearlove, the ex-head of the MI6, who basically coached him through what he did, the contacts between Robert Hannigan and Brennan, John Brennan, are so clear now. Everybody knows about it because basically Admiral Rogers turned on them. And so John Brennan's treasonous, seditious spying through the basically what's called HC or GCHQ, which is the more or less the NSA of Britain, they came to America and used Fort Meade, the head of our NSA, to spy as Britons on the Trump campaign. Christopher Steele wrote all that nonsense in collusion with Ukrainians, Russians, you name it. It's unbelievable. But it all leads back to people like Stephen Halper, who was the framer, who was trying to frame George Papadopoulos, Carter Page, Paul Manafort, Sam Clovis, and others. And he goes back to the same group of people. We are talking about it all goes back to Britain.
Well, in here, Julian is saying to folks here, look at this article. Who knows how many people looked at it, or if you did, you just saw it as a standalone piece. When we looked at it, we realized that it was telling an even deeper story of what we had already researched. And you're talking about international espionage with the Queen of England and her immediate circle around her. And I know people will say in the comment box, oh my gosh, the Queen, she's such a lovely lady. Okay, well, if she is, she needs to fire those people around her and get the record straight. And folks, this is the information weapon we need to fire out loud and clear around the world to get Julian Assange out of there. He is a prisoner of the crown.
Yes, and it was his communication about SCL and their involvement in Brexit, the Brexit vote, which was highly tinged by interference of a thing called psychometric algorithmic targeting, so that you can change people's opinion. And a group called Aggregate IQ received too much money during that time to create that program under the auspices of SCL Canada, which there is no such company. But SCL creates many companies that don't exist, many shill companies. One of our issues was we were going to chase down where SCL was going to go next. And then we found they already had that set up. They have 20 companies, many different names, many different guises. Some of them do nothing. They just move money. If one goes bankrupt, no big deal. They shift it to here or to there, and then no one gets any blame, like we've pointed out in our new intelligence report on corporations. They don't get blamed for anything, including crimes. Election rigging, who's going to be held responsible for this? The company that has been held responsible so far, the two in America have gone bankrupt, and the company in England has gone bankrupt. So what happened was they got exposed because someone got a hold of their emails and it said that they did this during the Brexit election. Then they chased it back and found these irregularities, that they were using a fake company in Canada. And it came back to two guys who basically did the same thing that happened for Hillary. It was using Facebook information and algorithms through Google so that you could control persuasion of people and target them and change their minds over an election. SCL has been doing this in 60 countries, hundreds of elections. They did it in 44 elections here in America before they went bankrupt recently. And they helped Trump a little bit, but if you listen to Brad Parscale, who said point blank, though he knew that Bannon was big into this. Bannon was on SCL's group. Don't trust anything Bannon says now. Mercer came up with the money to create this. Only, less than, it was in, I think, 2002, I think, is when it started, but it didn't get going until 2010 when they started messing with elections. And George Soros, of course, uses SCL as his number one propaganda tool in all of his color revolutions. So follow the elections SCL has been involved in. You can follow the color revolutions of George Soros. And remember, we were having a color revolution here during that election, whether people want to know it or not. George Soros had given billions of dollars to the Democrats, and they had swayed the election through much corruption, but also through these programs, the same ones that SCL was using. They call it mass deception. They call it counter-propaganda. These are liars who lie about lies and make it a profession. And they're generally, they're public relations people. So they come in and they can take somebody who's horrible, make them fine in the public eye, or make somebody who's fine, who's just been elected, taken down.
Well, Geoffrey, Patty was spent 33 years in the advertising business before or during or right towards the end, I don't know the exact dates, was with the Queen.
And that's what this research is going to show, and you're absolutely right. So this is about the power of persuasion. It's like Tavistock. It's how do we bend people to our way of thinking, and this is not only for commercial purposes, and believe you me, Facebook's been doing this from the day one. They sell your entire profile for less than $3.50. They sell it to anybody. And they could filter the negativity out, but they don't. Because they're looking at ambiguity. They're looking at how you respond to horrible things. And that's how they know if they can persuade you, or how strong they have to target you, and how powerful they have to adjust your algorithms so that your psychometrics, which is basically a profile of what you believe, and they can target that, whether it's commercial, political, sexual, it doesn't matter. They can target anything they want. This is simply looking at analytics of your own linguistics, depending upon the words you choose, what you like, what you don't like, what advertisements you click on, so on and so forth. So this is common. It's been going on actually since 1969 when it was made legal here in America, subliminal programming for the sake of persuasion. And we should be completely aware that this is quite common. So we have to thank you, Betsy, because what you pointed out is what we were researching, but we hadn't yet to reach it. But I believe, I'm speaking for the conclave, every member, that what you've pointed out is the truth. Assange was taken down because he pointed at SCL. And when you point at SCL, you're pointing at the Queen. You're pointing at Sir Geoffrey Patty. You're pointing at Sir Richard Dearlove. You're pointing at Anthony Wood. And you're pointing at Robert Hannigan, the ex-head of what would be the NSA in Britain. He quit 3 days after Trump was elected. Why did he quit? Why did Alexander Downer, the very person who passed on the information to the State Department, the lies about George Papadopoulos that supposedly started the counterintelligence investigation of John Brennan, why was it that he quit right after that? Why was it that SCL's group, the Cambridge intelligence seminars, they're closed? Why is CSI, Hackluit, and all the others, or they're all considering going under because they simply, for instance, let's take Christopher Steele's Orbis Business International. He has 2 other dummy companies. There's only 2 guys in this company. And he has 3 companies set up so that when one goes down, he goes to the next one doing business as usual. And there was an interview with his MI6 handler when he was working the Russia desk for Britain's MI6. Sir Richard Dearlove says to him, "Look, Christopher, I know you hate Trump, and you think you have this stuff on Trump, which was given to you by who? The FBI, the Democratic National Committee, through Codney Shearer's his dossier that was added to the dossier that Fusion GPS worked up with the help of Nellie Orr and Glenn Simpson, as well as anything they could gather up from, it seems like all the agencies. They gave it to Christopher Steele. He took it and says, Richard Dearlove, I'm so worried about this. What should I do? He says, well, don't tell the truth. Don't use any normal channels. That's been proven. There's been no intelligence. There was no intelligence behind the counterintelligence investigation that Nunes tells us. There's no intelligence. There never was. It's all back-channeled.
Okay. Julian Assange is a prisoner right now in that embassy. And he's being kept a prisoner just as much as if he were thrown into whatever the Queen throws her prisoners into in the dungeons. Okay? He's a prisoner. So I want to see, this is what I would like to see. And you tell me why this can't happen. Okay? I want to see a U.S. diplomatic car drive onto the Ecuadorian grounds and pick up Julian. And I want to see that car go to Heathrow or wherever Air Force One or something has landed there, because they all still have diplomatic immunity. I want to see his passports checked right there at the car. And then I want him to step foot on the stairs that have already descended on the tarmac onto that U.S. plane and get the heck out of his prison and come to America. Why can't that happen?
Brits never forgive, and they get revenge, cold revenge, no matter how long it takes. They're not ever going to forget the fact that he's busted so many of them.
Listen, it doesn't matter. Britain has now showed us that the crown is the enemy of the United States.
That's now, if at that point, yes. But why can't Ecuador do it? Isn't he now a citizen of Ecuador? If not, they should make him a citizen, put him in a diplomatic car, take him to Ecuadorian plane, and fly him out of there.
Well, there you go.
They can't touch him. They do it with drugs. They do it with cheated money.
Means,
they do it with every imaginable criminal thing.
That means that Ecuadorians, that they have been compromised in some way by the crown.
Oh, without a doubt, and by U.S. agencies too. I mean, the rogue CIA really hates Julian Assange. And Hillary hates Julian Assange. And Podesta hates Julian Assange. That means the entire democratic machine, which we're describing now, which is huge, it includes almost all the agencies at the top rung and all the SES, Senior Executive Service members, and Obama's entire administration was working against this.
So that's why I go back to it needs to be a United States diplomatic car that arrives on the Ecuadorian grounds. If the Ecuadorians can't do it, we need to go in there and retrieve him in a legal fashion and get him out of this prison.
When they finally have Trump come visit the Queen, which won't happen and hasn't happened because remember, Boris Johnson, who's involved with SCL up to his eyeballs, as well as many other people I could reel off, lords, barons, members of parliament, they're all deeply involved. They stood up and literally cussed at Trump. just base, stupid cussing at him as he was running, after he was elected, and after he was president. Shameful behavior, but it's because they're all guilty. The swamp over there is much deeper. It's a deep, deep, deep swamp, and much, much bigger over there. So you have the Minister of Defense. You have the head of the intelligence agencies, MI5, MI6 involved. You have the top people of the Privy Council involved in this. So they were going after Trump. So when Trump goes there to visit, and they finally accept him there, which they won't, and I agree with you, they may not, and I agree with you that we should just say, no more Five Eyes. You should poke out Britain's eye immediately of the Five Eyes. Say, we've just caught you with this, the worst collusion and the worst spying in
international espionage.
Completely. And it's the worst spying in American history. And so they need to literally sever our intelligence ties, because they're the ones who give us bad information on Syria all the time.
We need to put sanctions on Britain until they release Julian Assange, because we can show a clear path from Spygate to the Queen and the Privy Council.
Yes. Now, to finish my idea, if Trump ever goes there, he needs to go visit Julian Assange and walk Julian Assange out to his car to go get on Air Force One and deliver him to Ecuador or wherever Julian wants to go. Because he's committed no crimes. The only crime is the crime that Britain has committed to hold him as a prisoner, as you stated again and again, and you're absolutely right. He's being held against his will as a prisoner in the cruelest fashion. Because why? Because he believes in free speech. That's it. If he goes down, free speech goes down. Well, free speech went down in Britain some time ago. And now that they know that the top rungs created the Brexit, why? Here's why the Brexit was created, and why they used SCL to manipulate the Brexit election, and why George Soros wants there to be a second election now, because he's pointing out that since SCL is going bankrupt and the corruption is being admitted, and they found all the corruption, that it was a fake vote, so there needs to be another vote. So he wants to make sure that SCL's out of it. Why? Because CrowdStrike has become the number one control vehicle, along with the Atlantic Council, for all internet in Europe through George Soros. So George Soros' open society agenda is going to be now part of all elections. And if they can get SCL out, well, the SCL is the Queen. So George Soros, who, remember, the man who broke the pound, that's what he's called, the man who broke the British Bank, the Bank of England. He's an enemy of the British people. He wants the European Union to go on because he wants there to be one control device, because he owns 217 members, I think, elected members of the European Union are in his pocket.
They're not elected. They're selected by the countries.
Correct. They are simply appointed by the top dogs who he has in his pocket.
Sure.
Okay. So why did the Queen want to get out of the European Union? She already went there and fleeced it as much as she could. She's done. She wants to get out. But then you see the Queen isn't really keeping her money in Britain. It's kept in offshore accounts in one of the 54 Commonwealth nations. And so the Queen isn't just British. And neither is her family. First off, they're not British. They're German. Second off, their money is in offshore accounts. Third off, they don't want to be part of the European Union because it is not economically advantageous for them, and they can't hide some of their fantastic manipulations, like we're now pointing out, that they've been manipulating elections in 60 different countries for years and years so effectively that they can even get someone deposed who's been duly elected. And that's what they did to Viktor Yanukovych in Ukraine after Paul Manafort got him elected. They went in, they ran a campaign, they knocked him out of office. 4 years later, Manafort got him elected in a high position there. I'm not exactly sure which one, a ministerial position. And then he got him elected president again. And then there had to be the Maiden Revolution, another CIA, supposedly American-led, Soros-led color revolution that was, of course, helped by SCL. But any time that SCL wasn't there, it was Fusion GPS that was there. In Venezuela, in anywhere there's corrupt elections going on, you're going to have one of these opposition research groups / lobbyists / propaganda groups. SCL's the biggest in Britain. and fusion is one of the biggest in America.
Okay, we finished with that today now?
We just want to give you a round of applause.
Thank you so much.
And you noticed that they brought you the cheesecake to your desk, because when they finally realized that we had totally gaffed and missed, because we knew that he wasn't.
When you are looking for truth, it takes all different kinds of people. You guys are in there in the details right now, which we need. We need that indictable evidence. But sometimes, because I'm looking at the bigger landscape, I see pieces that are seeming to fit together. And then what you do on citizen intelligence reports, I mean, we've seen you go into the Akasha record and pull the scene of what's happening, and then you bring it down, and then you go and do your research, because now you know the words and the phrases you need to research, and you just put it together in ways that are just phenomenal. So it takes all kinds of research skills, and we certainly hope the folks out there listening will translate what we've just explained to you in the best way possible for your audience.